Ivan Denisovich. Oh, God.
I don't know why everybody in the Soviet Union has these difficult to pronounce Eastern European names.
Books, 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 books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that is a product of the decadent intelligentsia. I am your host, Grace Todd, and I am joined today by a new pal of the pod, Goad Gatsby.
Hey, it's great to be back here for the first time ever.
How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great.
Glad to hear it.
I've discovered a fun feature of the Trump administration. Now we all hate it. Let's not kid ourselves. We all hate it.
It's pretty bad, yeah.
But now, like, once every week, we're going to find out, like, somebody that Trump has pardoned got shot dead by police.
That does seem to be becoming a trend, like, really rapidly.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. So, whenever I'm out, I'll be like, he's got a gun and he was pardoned by Trump. is what I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a bunch of cops show up. They got their eyes on me, and I say, look at him over there.
This is a good tactic. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm not formally endorsing it, but I will be deeply amused if you put it into action.
Yeah.
Speaking of wild accusations. Actually, sorry. First, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, hey, I'm Goad Gatsby. And, I do things like live in Richmond and cover politics and, I don't know, tweet sometimes. Although tweeting, not so good. They're called skeets. Blue sky tweets. Skeets.
Oh, my God. Twitter is a bad place.
Blue sky, well, you won't have somebody come in and dispute the Holocaust on you if you post about it.
Blue sky, we have a blue sky. The podcast does. If you're listening to this and you're on Blue Sky, you can find us on Blue Sky. I think we're just Didn't Read It or Didn't Read It pod. I keep meaning to pivot over to Blue Sky as the lesser of the social media evils.
Yeah.
But there's a vibe there that I can't quite put my finger on, that I'm having a hard time.
It just doesn't have the teens yet.
Is it the teens? I don't think it's the teens. Maybe it is the teens. That's alarming.
Yeah, it doesn't have the young people coming in and doing their hip new dances or telling us about new emojis we could be using.
It's the lack of shit posting, I think, for me. It doesn't feel quite as shit posty, or it doesn't feel like it has the energy of the old world of shit posts.
Have you seen them post Alf Hog yet?
No.
Well, then you have not been on Blue Sky if you have not seen Alf Hog.
All right, I'm clearly behind on the. True to form for the person that I am 6 developments behind in the world of social media. So I'll catch up. You'll have to send me, what is it?
Alf Hog?
Okay. You'll have to send me.
No, I will not be showing you drawings of Alf. Alf, the 80s.
Oh.
Yeah. There's drawings of Alf with his penis.
I was going to say, so to clarify, we are discussing Alf's penis.
Yes, Alf Hog. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. You were saying it so fast. My brain was interpreting it as one word rather than Alf space hog.
Yeah.
The hog of Alf.
Yeah.
Well, good.
He's never met a cat he didn't like.
And on that wholesome note, Goat.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Soviet Union and specifically its literature?
Well, I know this is a controversial subject, but the Soviet Union better than the Romanov dynasty.
Okay.
By miles. All right? Did they do some bad stuff? Yes.
Okay.
But they did have people write things down. There was lots more literacy in the Soviet Union than in the Romanov dynasty Russia.
Yes.
So with that, they were able to write more books not only because they knew how to write books, but people would now be able to read them.
So the subject of today's episode would vehemently disagree with you on just about every point that you made. Which does not mean that you're wrong.
I said it was a controversial subject.
What do you know more specifically, or have you ever heard of Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn?
Yeah, I thought that there was going to be a list there. No, I don't.
No,
I don't know
just
who
the
that
one
is.
guy, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn.
No.
Okay, well, you're going to learn about him today.
All right.
All right. So, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, the novel of his that we're doing today is called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And it was published in 1962 under the sort of auspices of Khrushchev. All right?
Yeah.
So we're post when the book is published, we're post Stalin.
Yeah.
We've got Nikita Khrushchev in power, and the novel is published in this brief period of sort of softening of the Soviet hard line on literature that could be considered even remotely controversial or anti-communist.
All right.
Khrushchev allowed it to be published because there was this sort of brief period following the death of Stalin where the idea was like, okay, Stalin, bad, excessive, too many murders, too many people in the gulags. This was a problem. But communism, still good. The USSR, rah-rah, let's keep this project going. So what we're going to do is blame all of the worst excesses of everything that happened up until this point on Stalin specifically.
That's a smart move. Blame the guy who can't be alive to defend himself anymore.
Blame the dead genocidal dictator. Yes,
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal move. I can't wait to do it myself. When the dictator of my humble abode
Wait,
finally perishes.
let's blame everything on Jimmy Carter. This is all his fault. Everything was just going fine until Carter rolled up.
It's going to be the new thanks Obama, thanks Carter. Yes, exactly. And so we're going to talk quite a bit about Solzhenitsyn and his sort of relationship with communism writ large. But before we go into the novel, the most important thing you need to know is that he was one of the October children. Have you ever heard of that? October children, or like October's children, or sometimes they also called them like the October twins.
I go with Scorpios.
Yes, that, and they were the children who were born in like within a year or two of the October Revolution.
Okay.
So they were the children who have no memory of a world before the Soviet Union.
So kind of like how I have to tell all the Gen Z kids that that before they didn't even care if you brought Gatorade onto the plane.
Yes, very much so. The children who do not remember just like walking up to a gate at an airport without being fondled by somebody. So yes, he was one of the post 9/11 babies, but the Russian equivalent.
Yeah.
Yes, the October children. And so he never knew a world before the USSR. Not really. He did witness some of the worst excesses of the Civil War as a small child. But from when he was a teenager onwards, he was an ardent communist, like very pro-Stalin, very pro-communism, very pro-Russia. He joined the army during World War II, was stationed on the German front, and wrote some very indiscreet letters to a friend of his.
Well, first of all, I want to thank him for his service in doing his part in taking out Hitler.
He did murder Nazis.
Yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, so he had a group of close friends. They were all college educated. He had degrees in mathematics and physics. And he sort of had this core group of other, young, very well-educated Russian men, and they were all big thinkers. And so they were writing to each other about sort of trying to get communism as it existed in Russia to adhere more closely to like Lenin's original vision, and gently criticizing. It's funny because the way the biographies will usually frame this is that he made like one remark about Stalin, and that's not necessarily true. And I don't think that what happened to him afterwards should have happened, but it was a little more thorough than just like bad-mouthing Stalin one time. That being said, they were definitely writing letters to each other criticizing Stalin, and they had gone with the extremely subtle nicknames Mustache and Baldy for Lenin and Stalin, which was definitely never going to get them caught by the military censors.
All right.
Uh-huh. Very like, Orange Cheeto Man.
Yeah.
Kind of nickname. You're like, what do you think you're accomplishing with this? Anyway, while he was on the front, he gets arrested. He is sent to prison. And then he spends the next 8 years of his life living in gulags.
Again, we thank him for his service.
Now, are you familiar with what the gulags were in a broad sense?
Now, there's two types of idea of what a gulag is, all right? It's either the worst kind of prison you can imagine, or we just take you out into the middle of nowhere where you can't, like, find a way to get back into civilization and just say, yeah, figure it out.
So there were multiple kinds of gulag. Good job. He was not in the go figure it out kind of gulag. He was in a forced work camp on the steppes of Kazakhstan.
All right, I've heard about them.
It was not great. And he spent 5-ish years in this one particular work camp that was specifically for political dissidents. And he did briefly serve they had these sort of nicer gulags for scientists and people who could be of use, where they were essentially doing like forced academic labor, but they at least had like food and the chance to relax now and again. The conditions were much nicer. And he kept making himself a problem until he got booted into one of the not so nice gulags.
Now, I will say that I've heard stories about people getting sent to a gulag and then just like walking back to a city.
Well,
and again, that sounds like it's one of the good gulags in that one. Seems like there is some gulag inequity here in the Soviet Union.
The good gulags, the nice ones.
I would like to see a judge being like, I'm sentencing you to 5 years of prison. Good prison.
Good, fun prison. I'm sending you to the entertaining prison.
Yeah.
Where the good stuff happens.
Yeah, you'll get all the good channels. Actually, water park in the prison.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe the water park is a prison. Maybe it's just one big water park prison.
Oh, yeah. And every tube, you go down the slide, just takes you further and further into the prison.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now we're getting it's getting very conceptual.
Just
chutes and ladders, but a water park prison. I'd watch that movie. It'd be very trippy, but I'd watch that movie. Anyway. So all of that is to say, going into the novel itself, the important things to kind of remember are Solzhenitsyn is very much writing from life, and we will talk about how the novel itself kind of came to fruition a little later. And it is important to remember that this book is a byproduct of a man who went into the army very confident in his sort of view of the world and left the gulags with different opinions.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like, man, I sure love communism and or communist leaders, and then be like, oh no, these guys suck.
Yeah, pretty much.
We didn't win World War II because of Stalin. We won despite of Stalin.
So, all of that being said, let's take a journey into a day in the life of Ivan Denisovich.
All right.
At 5 o'clock that morning, reveille was sounded, as usual, by the blows of a hammer on a length of rail hanging up near the staff quarters. The intermittent sounds barely penetrated the window panes, on which the frost lay 2 fingers thick, and they ended almost as soon as they'd begun. It was cold outside, and the camp guard was reluctant to go on beating out the reveille for long. So, we are on the steppes of Kazakhstan. It is deep winter. It's cold as f***. No one is having a good time. And it is before dawn, and everything is still dark when Ivan...
You should just give everybody a nickname.
Well, they all have nicknames. It's Russian literature, so they all have like 4 names, and they use them interchangeably without warning.
You know, like this was written by Nikki.
Nikki, yes, exactly. Everyone called him Sanya, I think was his, what's the word? The patronymic is the father's name, but the, it's like a nickname.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Go on. Tell me more about this depressing book.
Yes. So it is before dawn, and Ivan Denisovich Shukov has, for the first time, been tempted to oversleep reveille. And this is unusual for him because...
Is it a crime to oversleep here in the Soviet Union?
Yes, it is.
Oh, man. You know what? I'm changing a lot of my views on the Soviet Union.
In the prison camps, it is a crime to oversleep. But also, the 90 minutes between reveille and assembling for work are the only 90 minutes, it says, that belonged to him, not to the authorities. And any old-timer could always earn a bit by sewing a pair of mittens for someone out of old sleeve lining, or bringing some rich loafer in the squad his dry boots right up to the bunk so that he wouldn't have to stumble barefoot around the heap of boots looking for his own pair. And so already what we are establishing is these people have incredibly narrow windows of time to call their own, and these are really important to them, right? Like, it's one of those little things that makes you feel like a person still. And also, again, very importantly, because as we're going to learn, there's like a thriving economy happening in this gulag. This is when you can do little things that help you make your life a little bit better, right?
Yeah, I believe in America we call it yard time.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But there are limits on that, right? And one of the things that they point out is when Shukov first got to the Gulag in 1943, it says his first squad leader said, "Here, men, we live by the law of the taiga, but even here people manage to live. The ones that don't make it are those who lick other men's leftovers, those who count on the doctor to pull them through, and those who squeal on their buddies."
Lick on their leftovers.
Lick other men's leftovers. And so this is also going to be a running theme, which is food is obviously at a premium, right? There is not a lot of it to go around.
Yeah.
And there is a sort of lively bartering system wherein people are always trying to get extra food.
Like eggs.
Yes, very much.
Oh, you know what? You've never heard of the video game Pathological, have you?
No, I have not.
It takes place in Russia.
Oh.
And there is a weird virus coming through, and you have to find the cure and solve it before everybody in town dies.
Oh.
And the thing there is after the first day when you show up, all the food, there's a run on the food, and you can't buy food anymore unless you have an extreme amount of money.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't have any food, you'll just be hungry, and you can't solve things on an empty stomach.
So our future in like 6 months.
No. Because, let's pivot to our ad. My Patriot Supply right here. You need to get yourself buckets of food. buckets of food and plenty of podcast. That's all you need. Back to you.
And when you have your buckets of food, the important thing is to never lick another man's leftovers.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure about that, okay? Because we're talking about leftovers, all right? He didn't want to eat those during his actual meal. You put those in the fridge. I'm just saying, licking another man's leftovers sounds preferable to just coming in and stealing my food during dinner.
All right. Well, we'll hold off on judging it, but Ivan Denisovich, at least, has told us that one of the ways that you lose yourself in a place like this is by stooping to licking another man's leftovers, right? So it's all about maintaining what little bit of dignity you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you're talking to a guy who eats out of a trash can.
And I support you in that.
Yeah.
Whatever makes you happy.
Look, they weren't going to eat it.
If you're finding dignity in your trash can, you go to town. Unfortunately, this morning, Ivan Denisovich has woke up feeling sick.
Well, yeah, he's been licking another man's leftovers.
No, he has not. This is very important. But he is feeling feverish and achy, and he is tempted to try and get off work, essentially, for the day.
Yeah. Do they not have sick days in the gulags?
Well, kind of. So everyone in the barracks is starting to move, and there is a ton of detail in this book about like the very minute intricacies of like how the camps work, like the buckets of human waste and how they're picked up and when they're taken away and all of these things. And we're not going to get into all of them because we would be here for 6 hours. But the camp is kind of coming to life. And the first problem of Ivan's day is that one of the work squads, and he is in the 104th, one of the work squads is going to be sent out onto the steppe to start building the new socialist way of life settlement.
All right.
This is bad because it is the dead of winter and there are no buildings there yet, which means that these people are being marched off into the steppe to put up the fencing and barbed wire that will then keep them in as they build the settlement itself. So there is nowhere to get warm. There is no shelter, and it's the most miserable work that anyone can do on this settlement.
First of all, as if like 0 degrees weather wasn't enough to keep people from traveling, throwing in an extra fence sounds good.
Yeah.
And what else?
Oh, and you said 0. It's well below 0 degrees. It's negative 40 degrees.
Oh, okay. Well, you got to start somewhere.
And so Ivan's like chief concern right off the bat is whether or not his squad leader has managed to get their squad out of the running to be the ones who are shipped off to do the barbed wire fencing in the barren, snowy wastes.
By the way, that's the classic move of like, oh, I'm sick. I can't come into work when we're doing a suicide mission.
Well, he's leaning on his squad leader, Chirin, who is a good squad leader, thankfully for them. And it says that this is his job, to elbow some other squad, some bunch of suckers, into the assignment instead of the 104th. Of course, with empty hands, you got nowhere. He'd have to take a pound of salt pork to the senior official there, if not a couple of pounds.
I do like looking for a group of suckers, all right?
Yeah, some poor group of suckers is going to have to do it, but
You're just being like, it's just putting up fencing? That's it, man? I could do that in my sleep. I say we should let some of the young guys do that.
yeah.
Give them an easy job so they can build up some experience. Hey, you over there.
Go build a fence. So Ivan decides he's going to try and get off sick for the day because, again, he does not feel well. And it describes how they sleep, and it's like you put your jacket on your feet. You like stick your feet in the sleeve of your jacket, and then you put your coat on top of you, and then you put your blanket on top of that. And if you are lucky, you won't be shivering so much that your teeth are chattering all night. if you're lucky.
All right. I think you should get like a little special little pillow for between your teeth.
Oh, there a chattering pillow?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very enterprising of you.
Did he write that in the book?
No.
Oh, I'm sure he had to leave it out for space.
Yeah, Shukov could have cleaned up making chattering pillows for all of the other people in his bunk.
Yeah, thriving economy.
Yeah, exactly. And so he decides he's going to go to the infirmary and see if he can get off. But while he's been sitting here dithering this whole time in bed, a guard has snuck up on him and sort of ambushed him for missing Reveille.
Yeah.
Because of course. And he sort of hauls him out of bed and sends him off to the guardhouse because he's in trouble.
I hate it when a guard pulls me out of my grave to tell me I have work.
Yeah, pretty much. It says, had Shukov been punished for something he deserved, he wouldn't have felt so resentful. What hurt him was that he was always one of the first to be up. But he knew he couldn't plead with the Tartar, which is the nickname for that particular guard. And, protesting merely for the sake of form, he hitched up his trousers. A bedraggled scrap of cloth had been sewn on them, just above the left knee, with a faded black number. Slipped on his jacket. Here, the same digits appeared twice, on the chest and on the back. Fished his valenki from the heap on the floor, put his hat on, with his number on a patch of cloth at the front, and followed the Tartar out of the barrack room. So, all of their clothes are numbered, for obvious reason.
Yeah, you don't want to be accidentally wearing someone else's underpants.
Well, it's mostly so they can identify you at a distance so that they can get you in trouble without having to even get close to you.
Okay, I guess I never thought about why an oppressive totalitarian state would need a number, but I would like a number for all of my clothes so it doesn't get mixed in with someone else's.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting is they make a note of the fact that this is a gulag just for political prisoners. In the other gulags that are just for regular criminals, they don't have numbers. So this is just something that they do for the political dissidents.
Ooh, yeah, you're a special prisoner.
Yeah, those no good anti-communists. Luckily for Shukov, it turns out that the guard was fucking with him just because he wanted someone to come wash the floors of the guardhouse.
All right.
So
I can relate. Do you know how many times I have captured a person and made them do my housework?
how many times have you done that?
I don't think I should give you that number for legal reasons.
I don't think that's a thing you should be doing, buddy. You can just hire a cleaning service. You don't need to be shanghaiing people off of the streets of Richmond.
Look,
Is this a kink thing?
No,
It's
no,
fine.
no,
You can
no.
tell us.
It's a power thing here.
Okay, well, isn't that kind of the same thing?
No, it's different. Clearly, I can just afford to have, or I can just do it myself. But you know what? I think if I tell somebody that if they do not vacuum that little a 4-foot carpet I have right there, then they're going back to the gulag. I feel a little bit more powerful that way. They feel like they're not going to the gulag. Everybody wins.
I'll take your word for it. And so Shukov, luckily, is not put in the guardhouse, which would have been a huge bummer.
Why?
Because the guardhouse is even worse than being loose in the barracks. Sorry, he's not put in he's not in proper trouble. I phrased that poorly. There are cells adjacent to the guardhouse that he could have been locked in, but they just needed him to wash the floors. They were just grabbing some unfortunate dude, the first dude to irritate the Tartar. And it's like, great, go scrub a floor.
Okay, so he was just like, as a practical joke, like I'm getting my pal here to scrub the floors, but I'm gonna make him think that he's in way more trouble.
No, it's more just like, I need somebody to scrub the floors, so the first unlucky bastard who happens to do some minor infraction in front of me is gonna get yoinked. But yeah.
Okay. So he's not in any real trouble. He's just scrub the floors trouble.
Correct.
Okay.
Thankfully, which is a relief. And they
Tartar.
The Tartar.
Tartar.
The Tartar.
Tartar.
And the guards are all, of course, kicked up in the guardhouse, and it's really warm and cozy, and they're just sitting around shooting the shit with each other. And one of them accuses him of doing a bad job and specifically says, "Didn't you ever watch your wife scrub the floor, pig?" Zhukov drew himself up, the dripping rag in his hand. He smiled, revealing the gaps in his teeth, the result of a touch of scurvy at Ust-Ishma in 1943. And what a touch it was. His exhausted stomach wouldn't hold any kind of food, and his bowels could move nothing but a bloody fluid. But now only a lisp remained from that old trouble. "I was taken away from my wife in 41, Citizen Chief. I've forgotten what she was like." And then the guards go on to essentially say that all of these, these scum prisoners, they don't know how to do a fucking thing and don't want to learn. They're not worth the bread we give them. We ought to feed them on shit. So it's a great environment.
Yeah. First of all, that's very motivating.
Yeah.
What they teach you in motivation school is tell them that there's room for improvement. Mm-hmm. Tell them how they can improve. And what they can look forward to it. All right. Mm-hmm. So you see this guy with his teeth, with like half of his teeth missing, and be like, didn't you ever see your wife clean? And be like, ah ha ha, you've broken any memories of my wife out of my body. Ah ha ha ha.
I haven't seen my wife in 8 years. And this is the sort of one of the recurring themes. This is obviously a miserable place, but like he has learned the rules of it. And it says, work was like a stick. It had two ends. When you worked for the knowing, you gave them quality. When you worked for a fool, you simply gave him eyewash. Otherwise, everybody would have croaked long ago. They all knew that. And so because these guards are idiots, he just sort of like gives the floor a quick once-over with a wet rag and then is like, bye, and makes a run for the mess hall. Because it's breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is still not light outside yet, by the way. It doesn't say exactly what time they woke them up, but it is pre-dawn still. And now comes one of the 3 top points of Ivan's day. Can you guess what they are?
Is it breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
That is correct.
Yes! To be fair, those are also like, well, just lunch and dinner. I'm not much of a breakfast guy.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah. So it would be like lunch, dinner, and then ice cream.
There you go. Lunch. Yeah. Similarly, Ivan has either learned through deprivation or taught himself to absolutely savor any and all of the food he's given, even if it's objectively pretty shitty food.
Yeah. That's what I learned when I was in high school.
Were you in a gulag in high school? Were they starving you and feeding you nothing but cabbage soup and putrid fish?
No, but I think maybe it was the same company that ran that gulag that provided my cafeteria services.
Oh, nettle soup, boiled carrots. And we get another one of those interesting little notes about the sort of inherent etiquette in this camp. So he runs for the mess hall. He lucks out, like the timing works out nicely. He gets his thing. He sits down, and they're all eating this sort of thin soup that they're given, which has little fish in it. And because you only have a very little amount of food, they're savoring all of the meat off of these tiny little fish bones. And it says, when the bones formed a heap and it was the turn of another squad, someone would sweep them off and they'd be trodden into a mush on the floor. But it was considered bad manners to spit the fish bones straight out on the floor. So again, there's this like in-camp etiquette that is part of how these men are making themselves feel like people. And there are a bunch of little examples of this. Right? You don't spit your fish bones directly on the floor because that would be gauche and rude. And similarly, Ivan says that no matter how cold it is, he has never been able to get in the habit of eating with his hat on.
Yeah. Yeah, bad manners.
It is. So we are introduced to some of his squad mates, and one of them, Fetyukov.
I'm sorry?
Fetyukov.
I'm sorry?
I almost killed you with that one.
Yeah. Woo.
He is like the squad sniveler. He's the little
Brown noser.
ferrety rat-like. He is a man who licks other people's leftovers.
Have you ever seen the show Recess?
Yes.
The what's his name? Randy, the guy who...
Randall?
Yeah.
He's a little more pathetic even than Randall, I think, because he doesn't appear to be a snitch. He just has absolutely no self-respect.
Okay.
And Fetyukov is sort of the bottom man on the rung in the squad. And that's nice for Shukov because it means that Fetyukov has gotten his breakfast for him, which is nice. So there are ranks here, right, in the squad. There's sort of a rung. There are natural rungs on the ladder, and they are assigned kind of based on respect rather than anything having to do with their lives outside of the camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah? Maybe? And this is where we learn that Ivan Denisovich's probably, it seems like one of his most important belongings is a spoon that he made himself out of aluminum wire. And it's very special to him because they don't have silverware in these places.
All right. So you just got to eat your little fish soup with your little electrical wire homemade spoon.
Yes, if you're lucky enough to have a homemade spoon.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we are learning about Shukov is that he's pretty handy, right? He's a man with skills.
Yeah. No sporks?
No sporks. They appear, I think it's either you figure out your own silverware or you eat with your hands. And again, and this is going to kind of be like the bell we keep ringing, it's all about maintaining what little bit of dignity you can scrape out for yourself. So a spoon is pretty exciting.
What if they just like stopped over at like McDonald's and just took a couple forks?
I don't know why they didn't think of that.
Yeah. Why didn't they go to the Kazakhstan McDonald's?
So it says, apart from sleep, the only time a prisoner lives for himself is 10 minutes in the morning at breakfast, 5 minutes over dinner, and 5 at supper. The stew was the same every day. Its composition depended on the kind of vegetable provided that winter. Nothing but salted carrots last year, which meant that from September to June, the stew was plain carrot. This year, it was black cabbage. The most nourishing time of the year was June. Then all the vegetables came to an end and were replaced by grits. The worst time was July. Then they shredded nettles into the pot. So they're being given just the absolute barest minimum to keep them alive. Maybe.
Maybe. If you call that living.
Yeah, pretty much. And so he savors his little fish.
Savors his little fish?
He savors the little fish. He sucks the meat off of every last little bone. And then he decides to make a run for the infirmary because he's still not feeling well.
Yeah.
He's got the aches and the shivers.
But he's still got to have his 5 minutes of pleasure.
Yes.
Or no, 10 minutes is breakfast.
10 whole minutes at
Yeah.
breakfast. Life of luxury. The next time you're eating a meal, I want you to just think about that. And so he literally has to make a run for it because one of the regulations in this camp is that you are not supposed to ever be going anywhere on your own as a prisoner. And that is wildly impractical and the kind of thing that is not enforced until it is arbitrarily. Right? This is the kind of environment we're in.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you're apparently a big time criminal, the supervillain. We have you locked up in here. What do you mean you're just gonna walk around, do whatever you want?
And on top of that, there's a new regulation where you had to take off your hat to a guard 5 paces before passing him, and replace it 2 paces after. There were guards who slopped past as if blind, not caring a damn, but for others, the new rule was a godsend. So they're constantly kind of adding these nonsense rules.
Yeah.
And in part, it's because the whole system hinges on arbitrary cruelty. That's how you keep people in line. That's how you keep them demoralized and frightened and keep them from pushing back, is by constantly instituting new stupid rules like the hat thing.
Yeah, where it sounds like those guards don't even, most of the guards don't even care. But some of them are like, ooh, it's like making a stranger vacuum my carpet.
Yeah, exactly. You make them take their hat off when they do it.
Or like, well, look, I'm just convinced that that most of the guards are like, cut it out, man. I'm just trying to do guard work here. Stop taking your hat off at me every time you walk by.
No, the guards are mostly fucking monsters.
Okay.
They're gremlins. They're all power mad, because it's important to remember that they are also trapped in a giant arbitrary power structure that will lash out at them almost without provocation.
So just like American Department of Corrections officers.
Yes. Everyone in this novel is in fight or flight mode at all times.
Okay. What a great system they have here.
It's so good.
Yeah, keep going. I want to learn more about this finest system in the world.
So he makes it to the infirmary. He hides from a couple of guards on the way just because he's like, I can't even deal with this hat thing. I do not have the time. He makes it to the infirmary and he interrupts not the doctor, because the doctors are apparently still in bed. Must be nice. But the medical assistant who is on shift, Kolya, who he catches in the act of writing what is clearly poetry.
Is that allowed?
Well, it says, he realized at once, of course, that Kolya was not doing official work, but something on the side. But that was none of Ivan's business. And we find out later that Kolya was a student who was arrested for political reasons. And the doctor on duty in the camp has essentially sort of lifted him out from among the common prisoners and made him a medical assistant, even though he has absolutely no medical knowledge, because he sort of sees the artist's spirit within him and fancies himself a lover of literature.
Okay. Or, this is the best I can get.
It says, as can happen only in camps, Stepan Grigorievich,
That's not a name.
the doctor, had advised Kolya to describe himself as a medical assistant, had taken him on at the infirmary, and taught him to make intravenous injections on ignorant prisoners, to whose innocent minds it would never occur that Kolya wasn't a medical assistant at all. The doctor wanted Kolya to write when in prison what he'd been given no opportunity to write in freedom. So, Kolya the medical assistant, frustrated writer, and now it seems pretty incompetent medical personnel, because Ivan shows up and is like, I do not feel good. And he says, why didn't you tell me this last night? It's too late now. I can only give you an exemption for the work of the day if you come to me the night before. There were only 2 exemptions allowed, and I've already done them. Sucks to suck.
But only 2 exemptions a day sounds. I don't know. Maybe have they heard about how like flu outbreaks work?
They do not care.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, the sick list has already been sent to the planning department. And it says a little bit later, essentially, that he had already written them down and done the forms. And then he had drawn like a nice, tidy line under it in his book. And so he doesn't want to fuck with it.
I agree. I don't want to. I would rather send sick people out into negative 40 degrees than have to adjust this little line here.
That is the overwhelming impression given by just about every official we meet in this book, yes.
Yeah. Do you know how hard it is to erase a pen line?
It's impossible, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can try, but you're just going to mess up your paper.
Yeah, exactly.
So he takes Ivan's temperature, and it's 99 degrees.
Ooh.
And he's like, too bad for you. Like, it's neither here nor there. You're not sick enough. And he tells him that he can take a risk and stay in the infirmary. But if the doctor, who is, again, still in bed, decides that Ivan is not sick, he will be retroactively punished for shirking. So those are his choices.
I guess I'll die.
Yeah. Especially because the doctor is A fussy, loud-voiced fellow who gave neither himself nor his patients any peace. He invented jobs in and around the infirmary for all the patients who could stand on their feet. Fencing the garden, laying paths, bringing soil to the flower beds, and, in wintertime, erecting snow barriers. Work, he said, was a first-rate medicine for any illness. But Zhukov thinks...
That's what my abusive stepfather would always say.
All right, well, the next line is, you can overwork a horse to death. That doctor ought to understand. If he'd been sweating blood, laying bricks, he'd quiet down. You could be sure of that. So.
Sweating blood, laying bricks.
Yep.
I didn't, wait, is that a real medical condition?
What, sweating blood?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, look, I'm no doctor, but I think that is a condition that calls for not laying bricks.
Don't you sweat blood when you have Ebola? Doesn't it just kind of come out of everything?
I told you I'm not a doctor.
Fair enough. And so Zhukov is kind of given this choice. You know, you can try and see if the doctor will decide you're sick, but if he doesn't, you're going to get in trouble. And so Zhukov gives up. Says he said nothing. He didn't even nod. Pulling his hat over his eyes, he walked out. How can you expect a man who's warm to understand a man who's cold?
That is what I tell my snowman every day.
That you'll never understand him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that snowman will never know what it's like. It's
true.
To sit down at the beach and have a nice pina colada.
He'll never know. I mean, he could experience it, but very briefly.
And on the other hand, I don't know what it's like to be outside 24/7 in freezing weather.
Yeah.
And always have a little 5 pieces of coal as a smile.
That's true.
So, look, we're very different, and we need to celebrate those differences and not make them lay bricks while they're deathly sick.
While I was reading this book, I was like sitting on my couch in my house, and at one point was like, "Ooh, I'm so chilly." And then I was like, girl, you were reading a book about people almost dying in negative 40-degree weather. Anyway, so we're gonna go for it.
Let's go for it.
We stop and get our bread ration.
All right.
Our bread ration is never as big as it's supposed to be. And it says, he, like every other prisoner, had discovered long ago that honest weight was never to be found in the bread cutting. There was short weight in every ration. The only point was how short. So every day you took a look to soothe your soul. Today, maybe, they haven't snitched any. And he decides that his ration is exactly half an ounce short. So This is how dialed in this man is on bread weights.
It sounds like me when I go and get a quarter pounder with cheese and been like, actually, this is only, I'm trying to do the math on how much a quarter pounder is.
Like, these beef patties do not weigh a quarter pound, actually.
This is only 2 ounces of beef.
All right. So we get our bread ration, and good news. The squad leader has kept them from having to go be the barbed wire losers suffering, which is great. Tyran, the squad leader, is like a genuinely good guy, and Zhukov and everyone else in the 104th kind of worship him and definitely think of and treat him a little bit like a father. Like, he is a beloved authority figure to them. And he is important to them because the work leader, the squad leader, is both the person who arranges your work assignments and does the paperwork that controls how much you get fed. Because everyone is fed in proportion to the amount of work that they have done.
All right. Yeah, so that sounds like why he's getting shortchanged on his bread.
No, they're just getting shortchanged because.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, you just always get shortchanged. Everything is, the other sort of thread that runs through this is just like everything is corrupt, right? Like everyone is always taking a little bit of something for themselves. The cooks are shortchanging the food so that they can eat more of it, that kind of thing. Like nothing is ever the way it's supposed to be.
All right. So it's just shit salad all the way down.
It is shit salad all the way down. And the only thing you have is your self-respect.
All right.
Which is when we catch back up with Fetyukov, who is committing the cardinal sin of standing next to someone who is smoking. Cesar, who's the sort of squad intellectual.
We got to, if you can't have your own cigarettes. You got to smell someone else's cigarettes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And Cesar is very lucky. He has people on the outside who are sending him expensive parcels pretty consistently. So he always has tobacco, and he has more and better food than everyone else, and he has better outerwear than everyone else.
He especially needs those numbers to not be like that's me.
So Shukov, they're gearing up to be shipped out for their work assignment for the day, and Shukov sees Cesar smoking and sort of angles himself to be like next to him, but he's sort of pointedly staring past him. And this goes back to that sort of self-respect thing, right? So the idea is he's putting himself there because he is hoping Cesar will give him the butt of his cigarette. Federico is also standing right there, and he is staring at Cesar's mouth, right? Do you see the sort of the self-respect distinction here?
Mm-hmm.
And Federico ultimately can't help himself, and it says he's like literally kind of drooling, and he's finally like, Cesar, let me get that. And Cesar very deliberately takes the butt of his cigarette out of the cigarette holder and gives it to Shukov.
All right. Again, those aren't real names, so it's hard for me to follow.
The point is that Federico is being consistently punished for his own lack of self-respect. But we're headed off for our work assignment for the day. And on his way out, Ivan breaks his bread into pieces and sews a piece of it into his mattress.
Yeah.
And hopes that it will be there when he gets back. And there's an anecdote he tells that there was a while where they made everyone and the squad keep their bread in like communal boxes, and it was a huge pain in the ass, and you had to like take like a hopefully weirdly enough shaped bite out of it that you'd be able to identify it afterwards.
That's what I do.
And Sushov thinks about the fact that like you would spend all day thinking about your bread and hoping that someone else didn't wind up with your piece because it was your piece.
Well, that's licking leftovers.
Yes. But ultimately, luckily, 3 prisoners escaped with one of the boxes. And so the guards smashed up all the boxes and burned them. And now you are back to being in charge of your own bread.
Oh, okay. How would you set your bread up to be identifiable?
Oh, I think I'd give up. I'm the kind of person who does not, that level of stress over something that cruelly petty, I think I would just shut down. I'd be like, I don't know.
Or I would just press my thumb into the middle of it.
Oh, just like poke a hole in it.
Yeah, I don't know how small the bread is, but yeah.
It's very dense. I get the impression it's
almost
more cracker-like.
Ooh,
you know,
maybe that wouldn't work.
Kind of dry. Everyone gets searched on the way out. Cesar is wearing a forbidden extra vest, and one of the other men in the squad, Buinovsky, one of the other men in the squad.
That's not a name.
Buinovsky is a former naval captain, and he gets mad that they are being searched and stripped out in the cold and starts trying to like cite different art. He's like, this is a violation of article this, article that.
Good for him.
It does not end well. He is sentenced to 10 days in the cells starting that evening.
Oh, after he comes back from freezing to death?
Yes, correct. Okay. If you get in trouble, they always do it after your work detail for the day because they want to get that last day of work out of you first. They're formed into a column. The escort guard recites what Shukov thinks of as the morning prayer, which is, marching orders must be strictly obeyed. Keep to your ranks. No hurrying. Keep a steady pace. No talking. Keep your eyes fixed ahead and your hands behind your backs. A step to right or left is considered an attempt to escape, and the escort has orders to shoot without warning.
That's what I would tell people to keep them in line.
Yeah.
But it also seems very, very inefficient. You just shoot everybody that goes one step off. Then you're not going to have your frozen fences.
Well, it seems to be working okay, I guess. We don't know how many people get shot for accidentally coming out of the column, but this is how they are marched from the camp to the power plant that they are building very inefficiently. we're marching along and everyone is lost in their own thoughts. And this is where we kind of cut back into the life that he led before he was in the Gulag. It says, a new year, 1951, had begun, and Zhukov had the right to 2 letters that year. He had sent his last letter in July and got an answer to it in October. Ivan Zhukov had left home on June 23rd, 1941. On the previous Sunday, the people who'd been to Polomnia to attend Mass had said, war! At Polomnia, they'd learned it at the post office, but at Temninovo, no one had a radio in those days. Now, his wife wrote, the radio roared in every cottage. It was piped in. There was little sense in writing. There is no answer. You couldn't write and describe the squad you were working with and what kind of squad leader Andrei Prokofievich was. Just now, he had a good deal more to talk about with Kilgus and Valet than with his family at home. Neither did the 2 letters a year they sent him throw much light on the way they were living. The farm had a new chairman, as if that hadn't happened regularly. It had been amalgamated with the neighboring farms. That had happened before, too. But afterward, they reduced it to its former condition. And what else? The farmers were failing to fulfill their quota of workdays, or the individual plots had been cut down to 1/3 of an acre, and some people's right back to the cottage walls. But the biggest thing that he can't wrap his mind around is that his wife has, in these extremely intermittent letters, because he only gets 2 a year, has written that all of the young people in his village are gone. They've all gone to factories, they've all gone to find a living somewhere else. And that from when all of the men left for war in 1941, the village and the farms are still being maintained by the same women who were left behind then. It is now 1950. It's been a solid decade, and it is the wives and the old women.
And they're not meeting their quotas?
They are not meeting their quotas.
Yeah, it sounds... I think there's just poor planning going on here in the Soviet Union. Somebody's got to go in and look at their books.
It's rough stuff.
I think if they just curb their expectations, they might be able to get through things here.
It says there are only 2 men of working age left. So it's not great.
I will say those 2 guys right there, they got to be around so many women with all their husbands and gulags. I think these guys are getting it.
Unfortunately, one of them is 84, although he did get married recently, apparently.
Yeah, he's getting it.
He's getting it. And one of the things that Zhukov is kind of meditating on is that the traditional crafts that this area was known for, the baskets, the carpentry, the fine woodwork, have gone completely extinct. And his wife writes to him saying that when he gets out, she is hoping against hope that he's going to become a carpet painter, which is the new big fad, using stencils on sheets to make imitation, nice carpets.
Okay, so he's going to make the Mona Lisa on a carpet.
And he's not particularly tempted by this.
Well, you know what? He may not seem tempting right now, but I think when he gets out, when he's no longer eating, little tiny fishes and nettles, maybe he'll come around and see things.
Well, I think that this is Solzhenitsyn. Zhukov has been left behind in a way.
Like a rapture?
Society has changed very, very quickly, and it no longer makes any sense to him. And on top of that, there's something that's been lost, and I think Solzhenitsyn is partly trying to show us that someone like Zhukov is in a unique position to see what is being lost, right? Like, this whole carpet thing is apparently very lucrative. It's completely unskilled. It doesn't require any artistry. It's mass production. It's still mass production by hand, but it's mass production of a cheap consumer good.
What, is it just like filling in the stencil?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Zhukov, for his part, can't see the point in it. It doesn't make any sense to him. He's a carpenter. He's a tradesman. He's a person who is used to working with his hands. He doesn't say it in as many words, but you can tell that the prospect of life as a stenciler of sheets is very empty to him. And even for a man who is trapped in this horrific situation, looking forward to that feels...
He's got to have his dignity.
Exactly. But we don't have too much time to be thinking about carpet painting.
Because we got to build a fence.
Because we got to go. No, thank God we don't have to build a fence. We have to build a wall and a power plant.
Oh, you're right.
Thank God. We've never gotten the hang of bribing people.
They should teach it. There should be like a seminar on how to bribe.
Poor Shukov. It expressly says, sort of the wrap up of the section about the carpet painting is that the other thing about these traveling carpet painters is that they need to be the kind of people who are like very personable and very brash and who are good at bribes. And Shukov, even in the 8 years he has been living in gulags, has never learned the art of bribing people. He just can't do it. So we get to the work site, and there is a lot of back and forth about the work site and a lot of detail that we kind of need to yada yada a little bit. But it's the most important kind of takeaway is that it is wildly inefficient because they have not given these men adequate tools and supplies. And obviously they are all prison labor. Like, these are people who do not want to be doing what they're doing. They're doing it in horrible conditions. They are exhausted. They are demoralized. And so the job site is just wildly inefficient. Like, there are all of these little bits of them like knocking apart things that are important so that they can fill the wood stoves, because they need to have the wood stoves running so that they can keep the mortar from freezing. Because again, it is now 20 below zero. And it's a massive waste of like everyone's intellect and resources and money. It is a stupid, stupid way to try and build things.
I do enjoy breaking down walls so you're warm when you're making another wall.
Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. I mean, like they are laying bricks in a partially finished building, and the lift is broken, and so they are having to get bricks up 3 flights of scaffolding by hand.
Okay.
Which is
a thing you can do.
Super efficient.
Yeah.
So they all get in place, and they are solving all of these just dumb problems. Like, there's no windows in the building, and they have to keep the mortar thawed, so they steal roofing felt from a different part of the job site to cover the windows up to try and keep it a little warmer. That kind of thing. And we meet a couple more of the squad mates. So we've got Bunovsky, as we just said before, who's the naval captain who has gotten himself in trouble. And the poor guy, the reason he is in the prison camp is because during the war, he was put on like assignment on an English naval ship because, you know, the English and the Russians were working together to try and fight the Nazis.
Yeah, yeah.
And when he got back home, the English admiral with whom he'd served sent him a gift. Yeah.
He shouldn't have been friends with. First of all, English, terrible. It was his fault for being friends with an Englishman.
And then we meet Senka, who Shukov seems very protective of. And Senka has, I think, maybe the most tragic story of any of the men in the camp. He was a World War II veteran.
Yeah, as what is during this time period.
Most of them also, a lot of the people in this camp are expressly in the camp because of things that happened during the war. And one of the things that we find out is that prisoners of war, basically all prisoners of war, were considered suspect. They were considered spies. If you were captured by the Germans, when you were released, you weren't released.
It was just a changing of custody.
So Senka was captured, escaped, recaptured, and sent to Buchenwald, which was one of the, not that there were any better concentration camps, but was a pretty horrific. So this poor man survived the Buchenwald concentration camp. And it says that he helped with the famous riot at the Buchenwald concentration camp. And when the war ended, it was Gulag time.
Well, they're just worried that he's going to be he had been brainwashed and will activate as a sleeper cell. How do they know that that's not a real thing yet?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing you have to worry about. And unfortunately, because of all the things he's been through, he's basically deaf, which is the other reason that they are all pretty protective of him. He's an old, quiet man who has just been through a lot of shit. Yeah.
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 So to get to the part where good things happen.
Oh, did you think there was going to be a part where good things happen?
Look, I know how books work. All right. At some point, there's going to be a resolution and a happy ending.
Is there though?
Look, I'm very optimistic. Keep reading.
I'm sorry. Are you familiar with classic literature? There's much back and forth, and it isn't until after lunch that they really get to work. So they figured out how they're going to do this whole thing. They're building this building. They're going to have to run all of the bricks up the scaffolding by hand. It says, you don't have to be very bright to carry a hand barrow. So the squad leader gave such work to people who'd been in positions of authority. Fetyukov had been a big shot in some office with a car at his disposal. And that's why he's so gross and has no self-respect, I guess. So basically they get everything in place and then they stop for lunch. We love to stop for lunch.
Yeah, it's my second favorite 5 minutes of the day.
And we find out why Zhukov himself is in prison. And it's the same thing with the prisoner of war problem. It says, according to his dossier, Ivan Denisovich Zhukov had been sentenced for high treason. He had testified to it himself. Yes, he'd surrendered to the Germans with the intention of betraying his country, and he'd returned from captivity to carry out a mission for German intelligence. What sort of mission, neither Zhukov nor the interrogator could say. So it had been left at that, a mission. Zhukov had figured it all out. If he didn't sign, he'd be shot. If he signed, he'd still get a chance to live. So he signed. But what had really happened was this. In February 1942, their whole army was surrounded on the Northwest Front. No food was parachuted to them. There were no planes. Things got so bad that they were scraping the hooves of dead horses. The horn could be soaked in water and eaten. Their ammunition was gone. So the Germans rounded them up in the forest, a few at a time. Zhukov was in one of these groups and remained in German captivity for a day or two. Then 5 of them managed to escape. By a miracle, they reached their own lines. A machine gunner shot 2 of them on the spot. A third died of his wounds, but 2 got through. Had they been wiser, they'd have said they'd been wandering through the forest, and then nothing would have happened. But they told the truth. They had said they were escaped prisoners of war. Prisoners of war, you fuckers! If all 5 of them had got through, their statements could have been found to tally, and they might have been believed. But with 2, it was hopeless. You've put your damned heads together and cooked up that escape story, they were told. And that is how Zhukov wound up in the Gulag.
All of this could have been so easily avoided if they were better liars. Look, they do not reward the truth here in the Soviet Union. They certainly don't reward that in Germany.
Well, and one of the things that is really important to remember here is the sheer breadth and power of the propaganda that they were all exposed to. All of these men finding themselves kind of caught up in this system are kind of taken aback by it. I mean, you can tell that they know or knew that they lived in a society where it could be dangerous to do the wrong thing or have the wrong opinion. But each of them, to a man, you can tell kind of believed, but no, this is so reasonable, right? Why would you put me in a gulag for being a prisoner of war? I have another guy with me. We were what do you mean you think we're spies? That's crazy. This could never this is an insane thing for someone to do. You can know something intellectually, but it's really hard to know it emotionally.
Yeah, or They could just be better liars.
Is that how you're going to stay out of the gulags?
Yeah, have they said, like, we pretended to get captured just so we could kill 50 Nazis?
That would have been a good lie.
Yeah.
It probably would not have worked.
Well, the other thing clearly didn't work either.
And then the other thing that we find out is that there's been a new thing happening in camp, which is that men who have been marked as squealers, people who are ratting out other men to the authorities, have been turning up dead in their bunks.
Ooh.
So it's a little development.
Yeah, I think being a squealer is sort of like a big health risk, all right?
It does seem to be, especially in the gulag.
If I was an insurance company, I would not be covering any squealers.
No.
Now, but I think it's just because, to start off with, they had really weak hearts, so they're subject to heart attacks.
Do you find yourself processing insurance claims on Soviet dissident political prisoners often?
No, I don't. I would have to pay those claims out really quickly.
We get a break for lunch, which they call dinner, in a way that drives me nuts. I always have such a hard time with that. I don't know why. It's not that crazy. Lots of cultures and times use dinner for lunch. It's fine. But Zhukov, by being very clever, manages to get 2 extra portions of food for the squad.
Ooh.
Yes. And that means one of them is for him. And Fetyukov thinks that he's going to get one, and he does not, because no one likes him. So that's an exciting development for the day.
All that extra little fish soup.
And the other extra portion goes to Buyanovsky, the naval captain, because they're all kind of trying to look out for him.
Trying to look after him because he's about to spend 10 days in the brig?
They're trying to look after him because he is in the process of learning how to be a prisoner.
So he's also sort of the new guy?
He's the new guy, but he's a good guy. He's an honest guy. He's used to being in command of people.
Have you ever seen the movie The Last Castle?
No.
It's about an American prison camp for ex-military people.
Oh.
They're not allowed to have salutes in there. So what they do here is, they put their hands on their forehead and then they swipe their hair upwards, like, oh, just checking my hair.
That's very clever.
And there's a general who refuses in order to do a war crime, and so he
winds up in the prison.
Yeah, and he organizes a prison strike. Yeah, Last Castle. The warden is Tony Soprano.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, the movie's a blast. They have more jokes in there than this, but it's okay.
All right, sounds good. Yeah. And Buyanovsky, there's a passage that they're in the canteen, he's finished eating, and he's just sitting for a minute, even though he shouldn't be. He's like in people's way, and you can tell this is kind of something that he normally would have like jumped up and gotten. He's a naval officer, like he's very by the book. And it says, he was unused to the hard life of the zeks, which is the Russian for prisoner. Though he didn't know it, moments like this were particularly important for him. For they were transforming him from an eager, confident naval officer with a ringing voice into an inert, though wary Zek. And only in that inertness lay the chance of surviving the 25 years of imprisonment he'd been sentenced to. So he's learning, slowly. And one of the big things that he is learning, that Zhukov has learned, that it seems so important and is kind of emphasized over and over again, is you cannot completely give up. You cannot run yourself into the wall. You have to sort of know when to step up for your fellow men and when to sort of metaphorically go limp in the face of the bureaucracy that you're being crushed by.
Yeah, there are times where everybody's got to pull together, and then when a guard says, take your cap off and bow to me, you do it.
Yeah.
Not that you particularly want to do it. You just pick your battles.
You do. You got to pick your battles. And Zhukov takes Cesar's lunch to him, and Cesar is having like a very high-blown intellectual discussion with another one of the prisoners because Cesar, of course, has been stationed in the office. He gets to be warm. He gets to do paperwork. And they are arguing about a different Russian author and whether the sort of core of the argument, and this is where you can see Solzhenitsyn sort of playing with some of these ideas that he expresses more fully later in other works. What they are debating is whether a genius is still a genius if he is willing to alter his art in order to please a tyrant.
You want me to answer that?
I mean, you can.
Oh. Maybe.
Maybe. I think the conclusion of this book is maybe. I think Solzhenitsyn's later work has significantly stronger viewpoints on all of that. But then it's finally time to get to work. Actually to work.
Finally. They're not even worth the bread we give them.
I know, right? Should feed them on shit. And this, I think, is one of the more interesting things about the book. So, again, we're really emphasizing, like, this is not an efficient way to work. And so there's a lot of dithering, and he really digs into the details of, like, how they are having to fight to make the work conditions feasible, not even comfortable, just to like the literal logistics of it, the stoves that have to be running to keep the mortar warm and the bricks, and Zhukov has like the only good mason's trowel in the camp that he has stolen and hidden for his own use.
Yeah.
Because all the tools have to get turned in at the end of the day, and it's just...
And also a trowel seems like a weapon.
That too, yeah. But all the tools have to be accounted for, and they're all shit tools. And so the first time Zhukov got a good mason's trowel, he tricked the store master into thinking it had been returned and then hid it.
That reminds me of the old joke of a man with a wheelbarrow full of sawdust. You know, he would take it out of the job site every day, and they'd check it and to see if he was stealing any tools. So he would do that every day. They're like, well, this is just so unusual. And come to find out, you know, it was his last day. They're like, I got to know, man, what have you been doing, man? Have you been stealing tools from us? No, I've been stealing wheelbarrows from you.
Yeah, exactly that. He would have made a good Zek. So they finally, like, there's so much back and forth. And they finally, like, they get everything locked in, and the squad can actually, like, start. And Zhukov is a mason, and he's a skilled mason. And one of the reasons that he is fairly lucky as these men go is because he has this skill. And skilled labor is paid better in food, right? And they get everything into place, and they start working. And it says... And now Zhukov was no longer seeing that distant view where sun gleamed on snow. He was no longer seeing the prisoners as they wandered from the warming up places all over the site, some to hack away at the holes they hadn't finished this morning, some to fix the mesh reinforcement, some to put up beams in the workshops. Zhukov was seeing only his wall. From the junction at the left where the blocks rose in steps, higher than his waist, to the right to the corner where it met Kilgus's. It's the other man he's working with.
That's not a name.
He showed Senka where to remove the ice and chopped at it energetically himself with the back and blade of his axe, so that splinters of ice flew all about and into his face. He worked with drive, but his thoughts were elsewhere. His thoughts and his eyes were feeling their way under the ice to the wall itself, the outer facade of the power station, 2 blocks thick. At the spot he was working on, the wall had previously been laid by some mason who was either incompetent or who had stunk up the job. But now Zhukov tackled the wall as if it was his own handiwork. And there's this section where everything kind of falls away, and what he gets lost in is just the, like, very straightforward joy of having a hard-earned skill and being able to apply that skill, not for anyone else, but just for his own satisfaction, for the sort of inherent satisfaction of doing something well.
That reminds me, there was a doctor who said that work cures whatever.
Well, and it's funny because it does, sort of.
Look, we were just making fun of this idea. We have to go back and pick apart it. Just because he's happy to doing the one thing he likes to do doesn't mean that, like, it's a great cure for everybody else.
No, absolutely not. And as the novel says, as Zhukov says, you can work a horse to death. He is finding internal satisfaction in this. It does not mean that there is anything just or right about it. But in this horrific situation, he is finding sort of satisfaction and self-worth where he can for his own dignity. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know.
Look, I'm just saying what may work for some doesn't work for all.
Well, sure, of course. I am not expecting everyone to find masonry to be the cure to the existential toll of living in the gulags.
Or physical labor dealing with the problem of, oh no, I have a fever.
Also that. That's not the answer. And you can sort of feel it in the prose, like the whole squad clicks in and they are all working together. They are working in tandem. Buinovsky is like working himself half to death, but he is doing everything he can to keep up with the other sort of more hardened men who have been here longer. Fyetchukov still sucks ass and they get rid of him as quickly as possible. But the rest of the men are working really fluidly, really quickly, really cleanly, and they're clearly deriving, like I said, like some satisfaction from it. They've all locked in and it's running really smoothly and they get this kind of fleeting but lovely moment of joy out of it. And then, of course, some dipshit shows up.
Oh, no.
To ruin it.
Who's this dipshit?
His name is Dur.
That's definitely not a name.
It's D-E-R. I guess maybe it's Dare.
Maybe it's short for Anders.
It's just D-E-R. That's all we get.
All right. Durs is the guy from Workaholics.
Oh, okay. And he is probably one of the worst categories of people in the Gulag because he is a prisoner.
And he licks people's leftovers.
No, he is a prisoner who has been given a small amount of power.
Oh, he's been given the leftovers to lick.
And he's power mad and is constantly trying to rat other people out to the authorities, but he's doing it from a position of power, which means that you can't just slit his throat at night. Or maybe you can, unclear. And he shows up.
Randall.
Because he is Randall. This is Randall. We'll just call him Randall, actually.
All right.
So Randall shows up and starts making threats because...
Dur is the only name I'll be able to remember, though.
That's fair. Do you remember earlier when I said that they had to grab the roofing felt to cover the windows?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Was he like, you're not supposed to do that? You got to freeze?
He's like, I'm going to report you for wasting good building materials. And he's threatening specifically the squad leader, Turin, who, if you remember, is like a good dude who takes very good care of them. And he's threatening him with extra time on his sentence, which is...
Yeah.
bad. And in some ways possibly worse than being put in the cells, right? Although it is kind of spelled out later that being put in these solitary confinement cells can kill you because the conditions are that bad. Having another 10 years added to your already long sentence in the Gulag is...
I don't know. 10 more years out of 100 doesn't sound that bad.
That's true.
If you've already resigned yourself to living to dying in that gulag, be like, yeah, maybe my grandkids will get out of here.
So Dur shows up and is throwing around threats, and Turin decides that he's not going to take it. Actually,
go on.
It says, Turin leaned up against him and said quite softly, though distinctly enough for everyone to hear, "Your time for giving terms has passed, you bastard. If you say one word, you bloodsucker, it'll be your last day on Earth. Remember that." And the rest of the squad kind of all come and stand behind him. And it says Turin is shaking with rage. And Pavlo, who's the second in command, who is quite physically intimidating, is also there. It says, Pavlo looked Dur straight in the eyes, a look sharp as a razor. And Dur says, "Now, men, take it easy." And he backs down the ramp, and they've successfully intimidated him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta have your dignity.
And his sort of last salvo is like, but what'll I tell the superintendent? And Tyrion's like, you'll tell him it was like that. I don't know. Like, go f off. Go away. And it says, Durr went off across the open ground looking haggard to warm up in his office. Something must have been eating him. But he should have thought a bit before taking on a wolf like Tyrion. He should keep pleasant with squad leaders like that. Then he'd have nothing to worry about. The camp authorities didn't insist on his doing any real hard work. He received top-level rations. He lived in a separate cabin. What else did he want? Giving himself airs, trying to be smart. So he overplayed his hand. He f***ed around and he found out.
Yeah, which can easily happen when, you realize, oh, wow, all of these men with nothing to live for don't like it when I threaten them.
They don't. It's so weird. And then the men click back into work. Poor Buinovsky is, he's sweating away and tottering like a horse. But he's doing his best. He's trying to keep up. And they get into, like, a rhythm. And Shukov is, again, he's kind of slipped back into that, like, really comfortable space where, like, all that matters is what he's doing. And it feels satisfying. It feels good. And it's time to start packing up. But they've already mixed all of this mortar. And they want to finish off the mortar that they've mixed. In part, I think, because the squad does get... It's not entirely clear if the squad gets punished for wasting building materials, but it really feels and is kind of implied that, like, this is Shukov's... This is something he's doing for his own sense of satisfaction. And it says that, Tyrion, the squad leader, is basically like, just throw the rest of the mortar away. Like, just huck it over the wall. And Shukov doesn't want to. So he sends the rest of the squad off, and he's like, all of you go, I will finish this. Like, I'll finish it really fast. I don't even have to turn this trowel in, because it's my special secret trowel. So you guys go turn the tools in. You go mass by the gates where everyone is, getting ready to be counted for the leave, and I'm going to get this done as fast as I can. And it says, wasn't it enough that Tyrion had told him himself not to bother about the mortar? Just throw it off the wall and fuck off. But Shukov wasn't made that way. 8 years... He was
built differently.
He was built different. 8 years in a camp couldn't change his nature. He worried about anything he could make use of, about every scrap of work he could do. Nothing must be wasted without good reason. Senka, remember, the poor Buchenwald survivor, has stayed with him. He won't leave Shukov behind. So they finish the work together, and they just barely make it. Like, they get it all done, and they take off at an absolute run. And all of the men have already massed by the gates. And, of course, they can't start the count until everyone is there. And so as they're running... And you can almost see it. There's hundreds of men who are all massed by these gates. And as these last two are sprinting towards them, they're all yelling at them, like swearing at them, because they've held everybody up. And it says that Senka, even though he's deaf, mostly deaf, it's loud enough that he can hear them, and he starts swearing back at them. And somebody is like, hey, 104th, your deaf man's a fake. We just tested him. So everyone's very mad at them, but they don't stay mad.
Yeah.
They've committed like a minor sin, but not a serious one.
Yeah, they're mad in the moment. They made them wait out in the cold.
Yes. But a more serious sin has been committed because they do the count and someone is missing.
Uh-oh.
Which is not good. Because no one leaves until you find everybody.
Yeah, turns out they got bigger things to worry about. Who is it?
Thank God it's not anyone in the 104th, which they were worried about.
Maria Abramovich. Yakov Smirnov.
And so finally, they figure out which squad it's from. It's from the 32nd. And the two guys from the 32nd go off to see if they can find the missing guy. And... the 104th are standing around. They're kind of gossiping with each other. Cesar shows up from his cushy office job. And I bring this up because for the second time, Cesar shows up, and he and Buinovsky, the naval captain, are close. They're friends. They're interested in the same kind of books. And Cesar says, essentially like, how was your day? And he says, well, Captain, how'd it go? He asked. And the next line is, a man who's warm can't understand a man who's freezing. What a damn fool question. And the captain is like, if you really want to know, I worked so hard that I can barely stand up, actually. But we find the missing guy, the Moldavian.
Moldavia?
The Moldavian.
Oh, you know I'm racist towards Moldavians.
I
don't know.
And the Moldavian has the distinction of being one of the only real spies in the camp. Or at least they all think so.
Okay. So they're all accused of crimes, and he actually did one.
That's what they think. It says, you could find up to 5 spies in each squad. But they were fakes, prison-made spies. They passed as spies in their dossiers, but really they were simply ex-prisoners of war. Shukov himself was one of these spies. But the Moldavian was genuine. And so not only is he an outsider, but they find out that he was up in the rafters doing plastering, got warm, and fell asleep.
Yeah, that happens to me sometimes too.
And now everyone is f***ing pissed because all of this has delayed them getting to leave.
Yeah. They just want to go home and go to bed. That's their 4th favorite time of day.
And they're losing the like very narrow window of free time that they have.
Oh yeah.
Like the longer that they wait for this count to be done so that they can be marched back across the steppe is less time that they have when they get back to the camp to do whatever it is they want or need to do.
Fair enough. Yeah. Freaking Moldavian.
The fucking Moldavian. So they get him back. They get the Moldavian. And one thing that is interesting is everyone hates this man, at least temporarily. And his own squad start beating the shit out of him. But they're beating the shit out of him in a way that is subtly moving him farther away from the guards.
What?
They are punishing him themselves so that the guards essentially don't have a chance to punish him.
You mean like killing him?
No, they're beating. I mean, they're hitting him.
Yeah, but like further away, like pushing him to the side and beating him.
They're maneuvering him away from the guards, and the implication is that whatever the guards would do would be much like, yes, he is being punished. Yes, everyone is furious at him, but even so, the sort of loyalty among prisoners, they are dealing with him themselves, so that he is not dealt with by the guards.
Okay, so that sounds like they're doing him a favor.
In a way, yes.
Kicking his teeth in for,
For solidarity?
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, the count is correct. The Moldavian has been dealt with, and they are marched back across the steppe. And that is where we're going to end for this episode.
All right. And join us next week for the second day of a life.
So what do you think so far? What are your thoughts? Questions?
Like I said, I'm still holding out for that happy ending.
Yeah, you get a lot of those in Russian literature.
Yeah. Although, all right, so if there's still more pages in this book and they're going home and this is just about one day of his life, it seems like there is going to be, I don't know, maybe an ambush. Are they going to be marauders in the second part of the book?
You know what? Maybe pirates, taiga pirates.
All right. Land pirates.
What do you think so far? Are you enjoying Ivan Denisovich?
Well, I gotta say, does not excite me the same way as high fantasy does.
Yeah, that's fair. Markedly fewer tits and dragons.
Look, I don't even like the dragons either. I like the swords.
That's fair.
Yeah, I just want the swords. There's no swords in this book.
That's very Freudian.
No. No. It's not like that. I just like swords.
Yeah, fair enough. So that gets us through the first 2/3 of a day in the life of Ivan Denisovich.
All right.
And when we come back next time, we will wrap up this thrilling narrative and we will talk about Solzhenitsyn and the American right wing and dissident Russian literature. And yeah.
All right. And maybe the next time you hear me again, another J6er will have been killed by the police.
Maybe. They simply can't help themselves.
They were in prison for their own protection.
It's just Fyetyukovs all the way down. Well, Goad.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here. I would have otherwise been lost wandering the streets, not knowing what to do with my day.
Where would you like people to find you if they can't get enough Goad content?
Well, you see, I have the Goad Gatsby Twitter. There's no the. Goad Gatsby on Twitter. Goad.bluesky.social. And also I have a newsletter, goad.ghost.io. Look, people were using the Substack, and now Barry Weiss is like, ooh, I want a cut of everything. So I don't use the Substack anymore.
That's fair. I have to admit that Didn't Read It, the podcast, does have a Substack. But I understand why you don't have one, and it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I still have, I have the account. I don't want someone to take Goad Substack and then just publish things like, actually, the government is good.
It's probably a matter of serious concern for you. Yeah.
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 I mean, that's what I would do if I found out a big right wing name left Twitter. I would take their handle and start posting the opposite.
Yeah, pull an onion with InfoWars, except that it didn't pan out in the end.
Well, look,
it still might though.
It still might.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed here.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here. And thank all of you for being here with us. I very much appreciate it. And as per usual, just a quick little plea. If you have a friend, loved one, frenemy that you think might enjoy the show, consider telling them about it.
Yes, in order to get somebody, we want this podcast to be like a cult.
Yes.
And in order for the cult to work, you need to recruit other people.
Yes.
And also, if you see somebody listening to another podcast, you need to tell them to stop listening to that podcast and instead listen to this podcast, or you will no longer be their friend.
I mean, the American right wing already thinks that literacy and basic reading comprehension is a cult. So let's just lean into it.
Yeah. Well, no, what I like best about this podcast is that it makes me feel better for not reading a book.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for today. We'll be back next week with more good USSR content. And in the meantime, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author, because they could really use the love. Bye. Didn't Read It was created, written, researched, and recorded by me, Grace Todd. Maddie Wood is our co-producer and social media maven. Editing by Tally, a true podcasting professional, and Grace Todd. Our theme song is Books 2.0, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Our logo was designed and illustrated by the incredibly talented Jess Versus. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia. Reach out to us with questions, concerns, or academic scrutiny at didntreaditpod@gmail.com.